When you're a footy show, Nicky, you should know every single player and every single jumper number.
Yeah. Exactly right. Yeah. Exactly right. The centre lady doesn't know anything.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Dodgy Punts podcast, episode 1. I am Jesse Dart, joined by Liam Courtney. And Liam, exciting times here. First episode of the new pod.
Yeah, man. Exciting times. Starting a bit of an AFL podcast. We've been talking about it for so long, and here we are. We're finally doing it on the eve of the 2024 season. We thought, stuff it. Let's get into it. Let's do it. Let's jump in.
Bit of fun, bit of something different. So before we get stuck into the meat and bones of this episode, let's talk about our journeys into footy. We'll start with you. So Liam, tell me a bit about how you've turned up here on the Dodgy Punts podcast.
Well, first of all, Jesse, as a West Australian, it's almost a religion to follow the AFL. I've been doing it since I was a young man, and you know what? I'll say this off the bat. I'm a Freo Dockers supporter, member for a long time. But the first games I remember watching were the Geelong versus West Coast games back in 1992, 1993, 1994. That kind of golden era for the Gold Coast. Gold Coast? Not them. Geelong versus West Coast games. Jesus, off to a great start. Sitting out the back of my parents' house watching it with Dad on the little cathode ray TVs. Jesse, you wouldn't know anything about cathode ray, would you?
What is that?
No, exactly right. Exactly right. Is
that like OLED or?
Yeah, it's like that, but 30 years ago. So it's essentially the same technology, but just turn back the dial. See those TVs where the back of it's like 45 meters long because that's where all the radiation comes from to make the pictures. That's when I started watching AFL footy, and it's been kind of part of my life ever since. Joined the Freo Dockers in 2005, I think it was, after watching them for a few years as a Freo boy. Born and raised, as are you, it felt only right to jump on board the purple bandwagon and support the Freo Dockers. So that's kind of me. That's not much to go through there, man. Like I'm kind of like the regular guy in this podcast. I'm like the guys that come in with the shit takes and the you're going to correct me a lot. You'd be like, that's unequivocally wrong, Liam. You are wrong, and I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
Well, I sure do love fact checking, and actually, I learned something new out of that little preamble from you, Liam, because we became Freo Dockers members in the same year, 2005.
Which is saying something.
I was 4. I was a 4-year-old boy.
You're a young lad.
Also, the first year I got my footy cards as well. So a good year all around to be Jesse. But no, for those of you who aren't familiar with me, I am also a Fremantle Dockers supporter, also a very passionate one. We'll also plug East Fremantle in the waffle as well, given they are my state league team, which I'm just as passionate about.
Wow.
I'm sure we'll get into the kind of main hemisphere of where my football prominence comes from, Liam, but I think we'll leave that to one side for the time being. I reckon we'll get through about 14 minutes before it comes up.
No, you wait to get the edit going. I'm going to put like the whole intro to this whole thing. It's going to be...
Well, I can look forward to watching that back. But no, very passionate Fremantle supporter, writer both about football and racing, and done a bit of commentary as well. Commentated the waffle at 16. Love my sport, love my footy. Very excited to get cracking into this series.
Yeah, man. And you can tell you're a commentator as well. Look at that bloody headset you've got. Unbelievable. That's like Dennis Committee Central right there. Bruce McAvaney eats your flipping heart out. Look at you. Where did you even get a headset
I actually held up Adam Papclear at one of the games at Optus last year for his old stick-up job. So thanks, Adam. Cheers.
Yeah. A willing participant in that heist, I'm sure.
Unequivocally.
But, we talk about being Freo supporters, but we're going to try and not make this a Freo podcast. We're going to try and spread the spectrum across the entire AFL. We'll go through some news, we'll go through some results, our picks, our tips, what we reckon is going to happen. I think that's going to be it's going to be a fun time. Now, I'm not sure. Like, we'll bring it back around, Jesse, to you because you are passionate. You have said so as much in your introduction, and having spoken to you at length about football, I can firsthand say that you are probably one of the most passionate people I've ever met when it comes to AFL. Not and unapologetically so. That's probably fair, isn't it?
I'd say so. That's fair.
Yeah. Like, it's literally, I've never met someone who has just, it's almost like a stream of consciousness. So this is why I'm excited about this, because you are going to be like the guy who's just going off on lovely tangents, lovely different paths and all that kind of stuff until we get to our final point, if we ever get there. And I'm looking forward to one of our segments we're going to be bringing in where I'm going to have to actually time you. because if I don't time you, you're going to go forever and ever. Amen. But we'll come to that later on. Come to that fun stuff. But what say we start with some initial thoughts on the upcoming 2024 AFL season? Where are you at? What are you thinking? You excited for it?
I am. I really think that the last couple of years coming out of COVID and coming into this new era with the stand rule, for all the flack it copped when it came in, and understandably so, I think at the time, I think there was some logic to bringing it in. I think it's made the game a lot better. I think
The
we're
stand rule has.
seeing. I think so. I think it's made the game a lot better to watch.
Okay.
I think there'd be certain coaches out there who probably don't enjoy the use of the stand rule because they can't send 15 players back into the defensive 50 at all points of the game.
Well, isn't that more the 666 kind of stuff, or is that a different thing?
I think it's all part of it. I think you couldn't really have one as effective without the other. I think you could use them both, but I think to make the game more free flowing, which is almost dichotomous with having prescriptive rules, but it does seem to work.
Yeah.
And I think as much as we love to rag on the AFL as a governing body, I think they have done a really good job with that. I think they've made the game better to watch, but also better to watch for newer people coming in as well. You see a lot more, I think, casual overseas fans coming in. And there's other factors to that too, like the spread of rights deals, the internet age that we're in as well. Lots of factors to it. But I also think having an interesting and engaging game that's quick and entertaining has been greatly enhanced by the use of the stand rule. So I'm very excited for the season. I think it's a good season ahead.
Okay.
I think there is one clear standout, and I think we'll come to that when we do the ladder prediction, and I don't think it's going to be a shock to anyone. But I do really think from kind of 2nd through 12, there's a big clump of teams, and then I think 13... Actually, I'll branch it as far as 13th, 14th, and then there's a little clump down the bottom, which I'm quite actually keen to talk about as reasons as to why they're down there.
Absolutely.
So a lot to go through with this season as a whole, but I think overall, our team aside, it's a very exciting season we're going into.
Yeah, I think based on 2023 as well, like there was quite a clump in the middle anyway. I think, and it was a big clump. It was like even down to where we finish 15th, I think it was 15th or 14th.
15th.
Down 15th between us, and we were only 2.5 games out of the 8. So while at the end of the season, that's quite a big gap. Obviously, you don't make the 8, but that's actually still quite close comparative to other seasons where it's been like 10th downwards have no chance in hell. So hopefully we get another season like that. And I'm looking forward to it, just from a regular punter's perspective, just from a guy who likes to watch the game, just from a guy who likes to see and talk about it. You know what I mean? It's going to be great. I do kind of have the advantage on you in that regard, Jesse, because I while I'm passionate, I'm not that passionate. So you've got to wear the crown this season, my friend. You've got to wear the crown of the most passionate man in football history. This podcast is going to go out there and everyone's going to be like, oh, Jesse Dart, that guy knows his shit. Or the opposite of that, going, there's Jesse Dart, what a flog. Which way are you going to go, Jesse? Which way are you going to try and steer people?
Well, Peter Simic just walked out of the West Australian, so I could make this podcast my audition for that job. And you know what? Before we go on to anything else, I actually want to touch on that because this has really upset me as a writer and as a journalist. And for those of you who aren't aware of the story, the Herald Sun have reported today that Peter Simic just walked out of the West Australian because he was hoping to publish an article that was, quote, too critical of number 1 draft pick Harley Reid. Now, a lot to unpack. No, a lot to unpack there. I think for me, the main thing is I don't like the narrative that writers, and I definitely haven't agreed with Summer for years across many of his takes and his opinions, and that's fine. But I don't want his opinions to be silenced, and I don't think that is conducive to a footballing discussion. As silly as some of the stuff he says, in my opinion, as silly as some of the stuff that he says may be, I don't think that saying you can't publish this, unless it's defamatory or objectively abusive. And again, I haven't seen what he wrote, so it's hard for me to go all in on defense of him. But I'm worried if this is going to be a precedent now in football media. I'm worried.
Well, I mean, if you get flogged like Kane Corn still in the news, just putting out his rage bait pieces, why can't Summer be out there just writing whatever he wants, just writing the most ridiculous shit that's ever been written and published? Who's to say that's not allowed? People like to read Summer.
People like to read Kane. I mean, I don't agree with a lot of the stuff he says, but he gets people talking, and I think for the most part, that's what you need as a competition. And he's not just talking about the same 4 or 5 clubs that we may hear about from certain pockets of the media. He's willing to put his opinion around the league, which I actually think is a really valuable asset to the competition.
Yeah. He's like the heel. He's like the heel journalist. Heel in wrestling. He's like, he doesn't care about being the bad guy. He's going to say what he wants to say. You gotta like that. If Sumo and Sumo was there as well, just doing his bit. So here's what I'm interested by though. So do you know the intricacies of the story? Like, did he just like put a story together that was just so batshit that the West Australian said, you know what, Sumo, thanks for coming. Like, this one's ridiculous. Not this one. Try again. He's like, I'm not doing it again. I've written my piece. I refuse to change anything, and I'm leaving immediately. Do you reckon it was that, or was it like just that?
I mean, I'm not across the entire situation. I'm only reading between the lines of what the Herald Sun have reported. But my understanding is that he submitted the piece for publication. The piece was rejected by the editorial staff or whomever makes those executive decisions.
Yep.
And Peter has elected to explore opportunities elsewhere, which is obviously completely within his rights to do.
Sure.
So I'm not sure of the exact specifics around that. I think the main thing I want to focus on, though, is the fact that, you know, Peter is a long-term industry veteran. His opinions are read and consumed by plenty of people here in Western Australia, whether they're necessarily agreeing with him or not. And for him to make a piece that, you know, putting on my biased Fremantle Dockers hat for a second, you know, you're probably not expecting him to write this. So, you know, purely from that side of things, it was almost a breath of fresh air from the side, the very cynical, Sumo just hates Fremantle, which I don't believe at all, to be honest, but there is that narrative that does come out. But I think the overall ideology of silencing a writer, journalist, columnist, whatever you want to call him, on the basis that it doesn't fit a wider narrative. I mean, I don't think there's anything controversial in saying that Harley Reid isn't Chris Judd. His birth certificate says Harley Reid. But beyond that...
Whoa, you have to calm down with those hot takes, sir. You got to come down with those hot takes straight off the bat. This is like 5 minutes into episode 1, and I probably should have put the 2-minute clock on you on this one. Crikey, Mosey, he's already off. I'm gonna have to rein you in, sir. I'm gonna have to rein you in, young man.
Rein me in. Well, how about this? How about we finish it off down the short straight then? I just feel like asking a respected industry figure to toe the line around a specific player when it's not like we're talking a drugs controversy or an off-field controversy of any kind. We're purely saying he hasn't played a game yet. Let's pump the brakes. That's my understanding of what he was saying. Then that causes problems, I think, in the wider industry, and something that I think the entire AFL media industry, from us up, need to be mindful of.
Well, you've got that side of things. I'm going to go ahead and assume that someone just wrote a shit article. They said it was shit and he had a hissy fit and walked out. I'm going to take that stance because neither of us have the actual answer, so we'll rock out with that. Okay.
Cover both sides of the fence.
Yeah, cover both sides of the fence. That's what we'll do here on the Dodgy Punts podcast. We'll cover both sides of the fence. Why not? Well, so what else is going on? So we went into a tangent straight away, which I'm all about. You know, I'm all about that.
We love
cheeky plug. I do love a tangent. Cheeky plug. That's Rank Podcast. That's my other podcast. We go on tangents all the time. I had to put it in there. I had to put it in there, Jesse, at least one time. And there'll be plenty more. Don't you worry. At least once an episode. But we got the 2024 season upcoming. What's in the news, Jesse? What's going on?
Well, we've just had our first round of preseason games, and calling them preseason games is quite generous when you're allowed to have X amount of quarters and X amount of players. But it's the first time when you get to... Well, ours was 6 quarters, except it was 4 and kind of 2 more. It was very confusing. It wasn't explained very well. But regardless, they've been.
I think what they do.
Running
I think what they do is they play 4 quarters as a regular simulation, and in the last 2 segments, they bring up all the young kids. They're just like, all right, go off you go, kids, have a run. I think that's what they do. They kind of get everyone. Everyone's legs pumping.
I have seen better organised Auskick clinics than some of these games, but alas, they've been completed. We'll go. I don't want to spend too much time on this because I don't think we actually get anything out of these results, to be honest.
I mean, North Melbourne spanked Collingwood, so well.
So North for premiers.
Yeah, 100%.
They won. That counts as something.
That's it. I mean, if they're beating the reigning premiers this early on, man, rocket up the league this year. Watch it happen.
So we've got Fremantle comfortably handling West Coast at Mineral Resources Park, a draw between the 2 Adelaide sides at Alberton. St Kilda thumped Essendon at their training ground. Doggies beat the Hawks at Whitten Oval. Brisbane beat Gold Coast at Brighton Homes Arena. Carlton defeated by Geelong at Icon Park, which is, of course, their traditional heartland. Sydney beat GWS at Tramway Oval. North Melbourne beat Collingwood, as we mentioned. And Melbourne were defeated by Richmond at the Casey Fields. I don't want to spend too much time on this just because I don't think we gain much out of these games.
Not at all.
I'm more interested to see how the games that start from today as of recording. So we're recording on a Tuesday. The first game of the preseason fixtures starts today. I think that'll be a better benchmark as to where some of these players are. But in saying that, I'm also probably not going to put too much emphasis on that as well, because it seems like the season's right on our doorstep, because it is. So I don't think there's a lot of... I don't think there's players scrapping for a spot necessarily. I feel like most teams are already somewhat organised. Or certainly you'd be hoping that a senior coach going in to the first games being in a week and a half, 2 weeks, would have a fairly firm idea of what their best 22, 23 looks like at this stage. I'd be worried if there was coaches auditioning final spots out at this point of the preseason.
I feel like you're leading into something, but we're going to come back to that later. The some news coming out of those games, though, was obviously Sam Powell-Pepper doing his best. What was that guy from Collingwood last year? What's his name? Maynard. Maynard. He's a unit, though. He's a unit. He's doing his best Brandon Maynard impression and got himself a potentially 4-week suspension in a warm-up match. What's he thinking? What's he doing?
It's a hard one, because I just think that's him. I just genuinely think that's 100%. Just Sam Powell-Pepper. And that's not in a critical manner at all. That's just, like, he's a player that I'd love to have wearing purple and white every week, because he plays with so much passion. Oh, yeah. He plays for the supporters. And for a club like Port, who is a working-class football club at his roots, they're the type of players that you'd love. Sure. Obviously, getting rubbed out for 4 weeks at the start of a season that I think Port will do quite well in, spoilers for later, isn't ideal. And he is definitely part of their best 22, 23. But I'm reluctant to criticize him outwardly, because I just think that's Sam. And
it is Sam. It is Sam. And it's given the AFL a really good chance to set a precedent for this year as well, I think. Like, if they're going to be rubbing out the head-high contact pretty much in any capacity whatsoever, then what this decision is will set a really big tone for the rest of the season. And obviously, we had a lot of controversial ones last year. Obviously, the Maynard one was a talking point last year, because you can see it both ways. Like, should he have left his feet? Could he do anything once he was up in the air? Was it there? Obviously, he got off because they, AFL obviously thought that was cool. But this is going to set a precedent for the rest of the year. So it'll be interesting to see what happens and what comes out of this one, because a bit clumsy for mine, a bit clumsy. But it's the ring rust, isn't it? It's the preseason's over. You're coming out hot in your preseason match, apparently, and you're just running through players. That's fine. My worry is you touch on precedent, and it's a valuable point, because we do need a precedent set at the start of the year. My worry is, how is this going to be followed? Because we've seen such different interpretation in the last 24 months, and I'm going back to the Cripps Archie incident as my kind of main underline for this. Of course, Cripps manages to win the Brownlow medal in that season, having, and look, I don't want to get bogged down in this, but to me, it was a suspendable offence, and precedent was ignored at that point in time. So, my concern is, if he slept with 4, that needs to be followed from now until preliminary final. If we've said that an offence of that degree is 4 weeks, then an offence of that degree is 4 weeks. Now, how you interpret that is up to the MRO and the tribunal and whoever else needs to be involved, but there needs to be consistency this entire year, given the undercurrent of CTE, potential lawsuits. The AFL need to get this season right. Sure. Now, interesting, I noticed you said there the precedent has to go all the way through to the prelim. Why stop there? Are you admitting now that there are different rules for the finals once you get past a certain point?
I am, and I'm a big fan of Alistair Lynch and Wakeland teeing off in the goal square in 2004. So I say go for it. It makes the grand final far more fun, especially when it's a flogging. Can you imagine how much more fun it would have been when Richmond towed up GWS a few years ago if they were just punch-ons around the ground?
I mean, look, that is true. That game was insanely boring. So I agree with you. I can't help but agree with you, Jesse. It's a good point. The first of many, I'm sure. No. We jest, but there are different rules in a grand final in terms of how it's assessed, and I think we just need to accept that. And my main point for that is that if you give us most of the finals, just throughout the final series, but I also, they're just going to go, okay, all right, listen, silly, slap on the wrist, don't do it again. You can play next week. Does it again next week. What did I tell you? I said none of that again, and you did it again. Third time, you're out of here. And then it's the grand final, and you're fine. So, yeah, just how it is. Just how
Other
it
news
is.
as well. Actually, topical news on that as well, given we're touching on news stories. Angus Brayshaw, of course, announced his retirement
Yeah,
in recent
that's
days.
sad. That's sad.
It is, because he, just like Pal Pepper at Melbourne, he's a player that I think really plays with heart.
Absolutely.
And without getting too much into the Smith, Oliver, Goodwin situation at Melbourne, I think level heads and centered heads are what are needed at Melbourne right now. And I think losing Gus in an on-field capacity is going to wobble them a little bit. And that's why I've just a little bit worried about Melbourne this season. I actually think they're the second most talented list in the competition behind Collingwood.
Okay.
I stand by it. I think their list is phenomenally talented. And when they're firing, there is not a team I'd be, with the exception of Collingwood, a team I'd be more fearful of playing than firing Melbourne, because they are so good when they're up and going. But losing a valuable part of their midfield, from what I've seen, a very valuable part of their leadership dynamic as well, days before the season, it was probably known or certainly acknowledged it was a distinct possibility before this. But
Yeah.
I think losing him at this time is going to just rattle Melbourne a little bit.
Look, I tend to agree with you. I think it's obviously the right call for Gus to do that, because concussion is a serious thing, like you were saying before. He's probably got a young family. I'm assuming. I don't know his life, but I'm assuming he's either got a young family or about to start one. So you don't want to have that kind of lingering over your head, and that's not pun intended, like lingering over your head, like the sort of Damocles forever and ever, because you love the game of footy. You can still love the game of footy from afar. Like you said, he might have some sort of backstage. I went to the wrestling the other night. Can you tell? All I've got is backstage stuff in my head. Oh my goodness me. Behind the scenes kind of roles that he can still take up, coaching positions and stuff like that, mentoring the younger players. So hopefully he gets to stick around and has some sort of impact in the AFL, because I did like watching Gus play quite a bit. So it's sad to see him go, but obviously the right thing to do for his health and his his future.
We've touched on news. We touched on the first round of practice matches. So, Liam, you better get your stopwatch ready, because
wait. Before you do that, Jesse, I know you're gung ho and you're raring to go for it, but there is one massive piece of news that we have to touch on, and it surrounds the West Coast Eagles, our favorite team. And this is a move that I'm on board with. This is a move that I think is going to greatly benefit the club this season. And they've
tossed out their lanterns, haven't they?
They've got rid of that the worst band in the world, the Birds of Tokyo. Gone.
They're West Australian, Liam. Come on, show your West Aussie spirit.
I could give two shits, mate. They are one of the most. They're not good. They're not very good. Look, if they're for you, good for you. That's fantastic. But then no one can tell me that Birds of Tokyo song for the West Coast Eagles didn't send it right to the bottom, right underneath the Gold Coast Suns for worst song in the competition, because it was horrendous.
But Birds of Tokyo I would describe as mum rock, is how I describe them.
Yeah,
and
100%.
Yeah. And you're right, the song was pretty terrible. It was fun to have a bit of a laugh at their expense for a few years, but let's not kid ourselves. Their original song is pretty good.
Well, that's the thing. Their original song, and it doesn't pay me to say it because it just is what it is. It's just a song, isn't it? But it was a banger. And hopefully it's a banger again. Apparently they're doing what we did a few years ago. Remember we had our little vote to see which song would become top of the pops, and they had the Eskimo Joe did a song for us, yeah. And what ended up winning was just a more up-tempo version of our old song. And I think that's what they're going to do as well. So I think good for you, Eagles. Good for you for seeing the writing on the wall and getting rid of that rubbish. Okay, Jesse.
Liam.
It's time for a segment that we are very lovingly calling Total Eclipse of the Dart. Okay, here we go. What this is going to be is Jesse is going to give himself 2 minutes to go on a rant. This is I'm not going to say a word. It's going to be unabridged. It's going to be just Jesse going for broke on his chosen topic for the week. Now, I'm going to set up my little timer here. Give me 1 second, Mr. Dart. If I knew how to work my phone, that'd be a godsend. Here we go.
This is why I don't do podcasts with people double your age.
That's right. How is this phone working? I don't know what to do.
First the 45-meter TV, and now this. Grandpa, you press the button that starts the timer.
45 meters deep too, man, not wide. It was like a 9-inch screen. It just went back for days. All right, here we go. Jesse, Total Eclipse of the Dart. Your 2 minutes starts now.
2 minutes. Two-time Brownlow medalist Nat Fyfe is the topic of this week's Total Eclipse of the Dart. Now, we've all seen the headlines. We've all seen the innuendo about Fyfe's back. He had 22 touches in the practice match against West Coast, playing a bit of midfield time, and good for him. But I would point people to 12 months ago at Fremantle Oval when he kicked 4 goals, and the frankly incessant circus around the fact that Fyfe is going to be a key part of the Fremantle forward line. What happened? He played the first round against St Kilda. He looked like a 45-year-old man. His body broke down, and he wasn't up for it for the rest of the season, and continually got games. He's not getting any younger. He's easily the second best. I'd accept the argument for the best Fremantle player of all time. But this is really worrying for me. If we're seriously looking at a club that has no success and no attributable milestones or accomplishments in 30 years, and it is 30 years this year, we're saying let's go back to Fyfe when we have, in my opinion, a perfect midfield core currently in Brayshaw, Sarong, and Young. That worries me. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't have midfield rotation. You absolutely should. But there are better options on the team than Fyfe currently. Ace should be running through that midfield far before Fyfe should be. Jackson should be getting midfield minutes before Fyfe should be. It's a worry to me, and it's a scream of desperation from a fan base that has achieved nothing in 30 years. And it is a sense that we are clinging on to the 2019 Fyfe too much. Nat Fyfe last year wasn't best 22. He wasn't, and yet he was playing. I don't think we can afford another year of that. If we're seriously saying as a club that we want a premiership by the end of the decade, which is what they're saying, he needs to have a serious think about his future.
And there we go. There's your time, Jesse. Ooh, shooting from the hip. How'd that feel? Having only 2 minutes to get your point across.
I think we managed it pretty well. I think we covered off what I was hoping to cover off for the most part.
Yeah.
And none of this is a personal attack on Nathan at all. To be very clear.
God no. No.
I have so much time for Fyfe, and he will go down as a legend of this football club. I know this is kind of spewing into it, but it's caveating, so it's fine.
That's
but purely the point I'm trying to make there is he's not best 22 until he is. And right now, I don't think, certainly off last season, he should be. If he comes out against Brisbane and gets 25 touches, 2 goals, and is a 5-0, sure, I'll jump on the bandwagon. But I need to see it first.
Fair enough too. I think it's a fair shout too. I mean, we all love Fyfey, as Freo fans. We all love Fyfey, but yeah, it based on not even last season, last couple of seasons, it's been a case of like, okay, well, where's he actually at? Body's broken. He's got his modelling career to think about after footy. Like, do we have to like actually really kind of turn this down a little bit in that? But he's still got the drive at least. It's good to see that. Like, he obviously still wants to do it. And sometimes, it's not like he's going out there just for a paycheck. So it's nice to see that he's got a little bit of passion back in the legs, and hopefully those legs can carry him through, at least 14, 15 games this season. Let's put at least that long on it. That'd be nice, because you're not getting through all of them, I don't think.
But they've got to be effective games, and that's my worry, because if we're sacrificing midfield or forward line opportunities, and look, our forward line's not very good, but I'd rather not be sacrificing opportunities for younger guys coming through for a guy that's simply not a forward, and he's going to struggle in that role if he is forced to play there because he can't physically do the midfield, which is what happened last year.
Yeah, but don't want him taking midfield minutes away. Don't want him taking any of old mate Tracy's minutes away up front, your favourite player, do any of that stuff. But okay. No, I think that's fair. Prove yourself, Nat. Just for us two. Just us two people. Don't worry about the rest of them. Just for us. We want to see what you can do. I hope to all God in heaven, as a non-religious person. Hope to Pav. Praise be to Pav that he comes out and has a fantastic start to the year. Absolutely. 2 minutes done. The Total Eclipse of the Dart segment. We're going to make that a regular occurrence. I can't wait to see what you come up with week on week. It's going to be fantastic.
Just wait till we lose the first 3 games.
Yeah, I don't doubt. I don't doubt. Well, I mean, it's okay. I was about to go into first three for Freo, but this is not a Freo podcast. I'm not going to do that. It's an AFL podcast. God damn it all. Speaking of which, Jesse, do you reckon it's time to jump into some predictions for the year?
I do. I think it's a high time to jump into the predictions for the year.
All right. Let's bring them up. Up on screen at the moment, we have my letter, your letter. I say up on screen because it's going to be done at the edit. You can't see my letter, but I'm going to...
I can't. I'm a significant disadvantage for not being able to see your letter.
That is true. But do you know what? Give me a second. Oh, it's all going wrong. It's all going wrong. I know. It's riveting podcasting, isn't it? Just listen to me fuck around with technology for ages.
Well, while you do that, I may as well make some light conversation with our viewers. Leave a comment. Let us know what you think about the show so far for the first episode of the Dodgy Punts podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Leave a review on your preferred podcasting platform. And, of course, make sure if you see us in the street to hurl relevant abuse in our direction.
Absolutely. And look, I'll set up some Instas and I'll set up some Facebooks or something soon so we can what are the kids doing nowadays, Jesse? Is Instagram okay? Do I have to get a TikTok going? What's going on there?
Yeah, you need a TikTok. Truth Social's popping off as well. Well, that's for the first episode, isn't it?
That's funny. Just a cheeky joke, isn't it? Just a cheeky joke. What's a joke, right?
This is a non-political podcast.
No, God, no.
But hypothetically, that'd be very funny if we had a Truth Social account for the podcast.
Yeah. The amount of hate we would get on there from confused Americans going, well, who are these random? What is this sport? That's not NFL.
This isn't the 49ers.
Oh, bless. All right, so I got the list up in front of me. I got Jesse's picks. I've got Liam predicts. So Jesse, you had an idea before, just so we don't cross over our lists too much. We're going to work down the list alphabetically. So where would you like to start? Please tell me who the first team is.
You're not going to believe when I tell you it's the Adelaide Crows, Lamb.
Oh, what the hell? I was not expecting that. It's out of left field. All right.
They are the pride of South Australia, or so they say.
Yeah, they are the mighty Adelaide Crows. That is correct. Big year last year for them. Young kids coming up through, showing some good signs. Whereabouts have you got them this year?
I have Adelaide in 7th place this year. I like what they have. I like the good feeling around the club they seem to be building. I like their list. I think they've got a really strong forward line with an ageless Tex Walker, it seems. I like what they have. I like the setup. I think losing Tom Dode is a blow for them defensively. And I think that's something that may end up coming back to bite them potentially in the latter half of the season. But look, they were only an umpiring decision away from being right on that doorstep of finals last year. I think their list hasn't taken as many hits to dissuade me from backing them. And I think their list profile is young enough and interesting enough to push them ahead for another year. So I'm going to put them in the finals this year. I think it's a good year for South Australian teams as a whole, but I think Adelaide are a deserving finals chance, and I wouldn't sleep on them to go as far as the semis or even potentially beyond. I like their list this year.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Mostly, and this is the thing, I'll be doing my list based purely on vibes. That's all I'm doing it on. Jesse's got some, relatively, scientific research or knowledge behind it. Not me. I'm going on pure vibe. And the vibe check says, for me, Adelaide in 6th. I think the same, what you just said kind of summed it up for me. I think they had, and probably still do, have a really young list who showed some really great signs last year. And like you said, right on the doorstep of making it. So I think the natural progression for them would be to kind of make that next step, especially with such a young list. Didn't really lose anyone in the offseason, I don't believe. I think they're relatively injury-free outside of duty. So I think it's going to be a good year for them.
I would tend to agree. I think they're set for a finals berth.
I think so. Next is the Will Ashcroft list, Brisbane Lions, if my alphabet is correct.
Correct, although Will would be at W, so he'd be towards the end if he was a club.
Damn it. That's a good point. Oh, Jesse.
That's okay. So Brisbane, Liam, where do you have Brisbane finishing this year? We'll start with you first.
Yeah, I got them having another strong year. I think it'd be silly for us to say they won't. Where are my tenses at? Won't have a good year again. I've got them finishing 3rd this year. I think they're going to still push up into the top 4, even though I'm pretty sure this is the year they start playing all their games in Gold Coast, I think it is, because they're starting to redo the stadium. I was speaking to a Brisbane Lions mate of mine who's over in, you wouldn't believe it, Brisbane. And she was making a really big deal about not wanting to travel and not going to travel to Gold Coast to watch them play. So I believe that might start this year, which I think is going to knock them down a peg just a smidge, not having as many kind of home games, quote unquote, in front of their peeps, which probably what stops me from having them a little bit higher. But that's for me. I think they're another strong year for Brisbane for sure.
Well, I've done the Gold Coast to Brisbane drive. It's pretty dull. It's pretty dreary. Nothing really happens except for bad traffic. So I can understand that sentiment. But
you didn't stop at Dreamworld on the way or something? Wet and Wild's there as well?
Well, the day I drove past, it was absolutely hemorrhaging down with rain. So it probably wasn't the best idea to get Wet and Wild. I might have ended up going to one of the canals, overshooting the slide a bit. But speaking of slides, I've got Brisbane having a little bit of a slide this year. That's not to say they won't be in the finals. I think they will be. I've got them finishing 5th, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Primarily, I'm worried about where they are psychologically, because we've seen this with clubs before where they've knocked on the door a couple of times. I'm thinking mostly Western Bulldogs, kind of 2009, 2011, that kind of year, and also Fremantle 2013 through 15. They've taken a fair few blows. They shook the straight sets monkey off their back last year, only to go down in a pretty good grand final in the grand scheme of things. And
it was a great one. Yeah.
It was a great grand final, and I'm just worried about them psychologically. They've got Dodgy in, which is a big help for them.
Wait,
but
how many Dodays are there?
The same one. He moved from Adelaide to Brisbane.
Oh, okay. This is why you're here, Jesse. This is why I'm not doing this by myself.
This is why I've got a cheat sheet to the left of me.
Oh, I see, you cheeky boy. All right. So fair enough.
And I also think a big factor is in me having them slide as well is the fact that the last year's competition was so even. I'm worried they maybe get inflated on the basis of the fact they were just the ones that got to the grand final.
Okay.
Remember, Carlton had them dead to rights in, I think, the qualifying final at stages, and they just couldn't put them away. And that's a credit to Brisbane for fighting back and getting the job done. But I don't think that they were necessarily the second best team, despite making the grand final. I think there was about 3 or 4 teams on their day who could have been the second best team. So I have Brisbane on a slide. I'm worried that the horse is bolted now, and that last year, much like Fremantle in 2022, much like the Western Bulldogs in 2016, was lightning in a bottle, and the lightning's escaped.
Fair enough. Now, I did send you the ladder several times to double check it before I put this up and made the little graphic for it. You had Brisbane in 4th. But,
I haven't fixed my ladder from Melbourne being slid down.
No, you haven't.
Ladder. So make that Brisbane in 4th, with the caveat that they're only there because I think Melbourne are going to drop. So based on that, they're good enough to be in the top 4. However, ultimately, there's concerns about them, I think.
Fair enough. All right, who we got next?
Next, we have Carlton.
We are the Navy Blues. We are the old dark Navy Blues. It's funny, for such a slow song, God, I love to hear it though. Is that bad? Is that wrong?
No, but I think we'll certainly hear more Taylor Swift songs than Carlton songs at the MCG this year. However, in saying that, I do have Carlton having quite a bumper year this year. I think this has to be it for Carlton, doesn't it? This has to be them. Like, if it's not this team and this setup and this lightning in a bottle that we talk about, then when is it going to be? I've got them finishing in 2nd place. I think they have a fantastic forward list, a fantastic midfield group. Defensively, I think there's vulnerabilities there, particularly exiting defense. I think some of their transition play, while they just seem to have this mad be without a head attitude of getting the ball out sometimes, it does leave you. It works sometimes, but it's also conducive to giving the ball away. So we'll see how that plays out. But I think for Carlton, they just seem to have it this year. And injury-free years for their key players like Kerner, like Walsh, like Cripps, if they can keep those 3 guys on the field for 18 games plus this year, I think they should be pushing top 2. I think anything less than top 4 for Carlton this year, obviously notwithstanding any major injury crises, scandals, etc., a fair and balanced season for Carlton that doesn't make top 4, I think would be considered an abject failure with the list that they have.
I 100% agree, and I think that this is their year. I agree with you. It's this or it's never. I've got them minor premiers. I've got them finishing top of the pops.
Ooh.
Big call, I know. I got them finished top of the pops this year. Again, like last year was it seemed like such a huge step last year. Like when they got to the finals, everyone was like, "Oh, look at Carlton go! Look at them, little engine than could." But then everyone kind of just, or not everyone, I just kind of forgot that like preceding those years, it was just like turmoil for just how long? Just so many years. And Vossi's come in and he's obviously made a lot of changes, brought a new attitude to it. And I think, yeah, if it's not this year, then I don't know when it's going to be. And I've got family from Carlton. I'm pretty sure it's Carlton. Who knows? I got family from all over I got family from all over Melbourne, but I'm pretty sure I got family from Carlton. I got a bit of a soft spot for Carlton. I think because my dad also has a bit of a soft spot for Carlton, so it kind of comes across. So yeah, I've got them going top of the pops this year. Let's see if that happens.
Keep in mind that they only had half a good season last year.
Yeah,
there was decrying and carrying on before the bye that Voss should be out and the whole club should sack the list, try again. It was only half a good season. It was a fantastic half a good season that almost got them a grand final. Yeah. But ultimately, they only showed us what they actually can do for half of that season. So I don't think it's unrealistic to call them minor premiers. I don't think it's unrealistic to call them genuine flag contenders either.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
You know, that they have one of the key things that make a club successful, which I'll come to when we talk about the other end of the spectrum. But they have that big groundswell heartland and that big, strong administrative base that gives them every chance as a club to succeed.
Yeah, it's amazing how like they did turn it around on a dime almost last season. Like it seemed like overnight they were just like, wait a second, we forgot to turn the lights on over here. Turn those lights on. All of a sudden, everything started to fall into place. So, no, it's going to be a good year for them, I feel. And if it's not, then it's Carlton of old. Strong, we're bold. They'll be later. They'll be later.
That sure will be. What will not be later, though, is Collingwood, our fourth team to cover for this season. Liam, I think I kicked off the last one, so you can kick us off here. Where do you have Collingwood finishing this season?
Second, behind the Pies. No, behind the Pies. They are the Pies. Behind the Blues. God, you can tell I've had to take the day off work today because I'm just like my brain's all over the shop. And this is probably the worst idea to do a podcast. My brain's all over the shop because I can't even speak properly. But
That's
it's
why
fine.
you have me here.
Thank you, Jesse. No, I've got them coming second. I don't think there's much to say about Collingwood, to be honest. They won the flag last year for a reason. They were kind of the favourites throughout the entire season for a reason. I don't think a lot is going to change this season. I think it's going to be a case of I don't think they're going to have the premiership hangover that Geelong had last year. I think it's going to be pretty. I think they'll be pretty staunch in their back-to-back challenge this year. And I don't really have much more to say about that. There's not much more to add. I don't know what's changed. It's still Collingwood. They're still good.
And they've added, arguably, certainly a top 5 small forward in the competition, Lockie Schultz as well. So
I didn't want to talk about that because it still kind of stings.
Look, I think, notwithstanding the fact the grand final was quite close last year, I think there's a sense that the other 17 teams in the competition need to get to Collingwood's level a bit.
Yes.
Because I feel like you watched the entire season back last year. It's not to say they weren't vulnerable, it's not to say they didn't lose games, but every loss you got the sense, they'll just win next week.
Yeah. And they'll clutch as well. They'll clutch.
That they understand how to win. And they have a list. They have got the best young player in the competition in Nick Dacos, and he is that. And he probably does win a Brownlow this year if he plays 20 plus games injury-free and productively. I think he does win a Brownlow just purely on that. But Collingwood, like Carlton, have that strong, entrenched club ideology and support behind them, which is a big help. They've got a fantastic list. They've got a coach that the players buy into. I think McRae's got his tactical weaknesses, but I think the players buy into his vision enough to mitigate that. Certainly to the point you get a premiership. It's hard to call a coach that's a flag winning coach, tactically vulnerable at times, but I think he is.
Yeah. Sure.
But in saying that, I think he's still a upper echelon coach in the competition now, and he's going to be very, very hard to outcoach this year because he has the buy-in from his playing group. That's
right, and it also helps when you don't have to leave Melbourne, for 19 of the 22 matches. It's great. I'm sure it's not that bad.
They have to go to Jervis for opening round. Haven't you heard? They're not very happy about that one.
Oh, diddums. Oh, but it's not even round 1. It's round 0. Everyone knows, so it's fine. It doesn't even count. It does count. We'll talk about that next week. Okay, who's next off the list?
Essendon. And Liam, I'm worried about Essendon this year.
Yeah, no shit.
I'm worried about Essendon.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of reasons for this. I think they potentially overperformed last season, and I don't actually think they went that well. But I think Essendon's biggest problem for me is their paper-thin depth. Because if Peter Wright goes out, and Fremantle have this problem too, and so do many other clubs, but I think Essendon's really magnified. If Peter Wright goes out of that side, where are the goals coming from? We saw that at times last year when he wasn't playing. I think we're going to see it again. Does Ben Mackay have to go forward? Is that going to have to be the swingman role for him? If they lose a couple of key players, I think they are the most vulnerable side in the competition to injuries this season. In terms of, if they lose 2 of these 4 key players, where does that put them? I mean, I think Zach Merritt's found his level. I think Darcy Parish is probably starting to decline in terms of effectiveness. So there's enough in Essendon's list to make me worried. There's enough for me to put them in 14th spot.
Yeah, I think, did Jake Stringer retire yet or no?
No, he's still there.
16th. All right, 16th. Next team. Yes. No, I'm worried about the Bombers as well. I think having went over to Melbourne with my dad last year, watched a few games over in Melbourne, which is always a fun time. And one of the games I watched, I believe it was Essendon Hawks, I believe it was. Look, it doesn't matter really. All I remember is watching the game and going, Essendon aren't very good. And this was watching from prime seats at Marvel Stadium, let me tell you. First tier, overlooking the forward pocket. Beautiful, beautiful look down the ground. Could see everything. It was wonderful. And the whole time I was thinking to myself, this team, man, I'm not too sure where their improvement is coming from. And so in that sense, I can only see them going down. And again, going purely on vibes, 16th. I don't really have much more to say about that. But Essendon. Oh, shit, is it time?
Yeah, one team we should have offended to say.
Is it time? Okay.
It is. All right, so Fremantle coming off a pretty disappointing season, I think it's fair to say, to last year. Liam, I'll let you go first here.
Yeah, because I know what you yeah, no shit. And I know where you've put them, which I think is absolutely bananas. But anyway, that's fine. You'll tell us exactly why you think they're where they are in just a second. To have anyway, I won't spoil it. Where have I put them? 13th. I put them 13th. I'm not as dark on it as you are this season. I think there'll be not much improvement. I think we'll stay about the same. Finished 15th last year. I'm an optimist. I like to think about it in a positive term. And I've got a little bit of faith in the players. Maybe not so much the coach, but I do have some faith in the players to kind of, to push through a little bit more. I think Sarong and Brayshaw are now starting to set themselves up nicely in the middle as leaders. I know that one more year for Pierce, that's all he's going to get. I think next year it's going to be either both of them or one of them and a VC for the other. And I think that'll set us off on a good trajectory from there. But I don't think it's going to be as bad and as dire as some others might think it might be. But yeah, no, I think we should win against most of the people I have below us, I think. And I think with a few extra surprises up the top, I think we should be set for around about that same spot. We're not making finals this year. If we do, I'll be stoked, but I don't think we're going to make finals this year. I think that would be unrealistic for us to be aiming that high. Not be aiming that high. We should be aiming that high to get that high for this year, but that's where I have them. Jesse, tell the lovely people at home where you have put these lovely Dockers, you crazy man.
I have Fremantle in 17th position this season. And there's a few reasons for that. And to explain my reasons properly, I need to explain my theory as to the 3 reasons why clubs do not succeed in the most egalitarian competition in the world. Because we have, in my opinion, the fairest competition in the world. Draft, trade, free agency.
I'm going to cut you off really quickly, Jesse. You can start that thought again because your camera keeps just drifting off to the side.
Drifting off to the side. Which way do I need to go?
That way.
Nope.
Nah.
There we go.
Way.
Okay, no, that's still not quite right.
Yeah, it's because you lean right. It's crazy. All right.
This is getting political. No, so there are 3 reasons why clubs in this competition do not succeed. The first is poor list management, and that comes down to drafting decisions, trading/free agency decisions, and also player retention. That's the first reason. The second reason is poor coaching. And the third reason is poor club culture, which I'm encompassing back office decisions, so the executive, and also a little bit of player retention as well, because you get that kind of on-field culture as well.
Sure.
Fremantle right now are failing in all three categories, and that's not good. We continue to hemorrhage players elsewhere. I'm really concerned about the list management here, because you can't have Western Australian players actively seeking to leave the club to go to Victoria, like we've had with Roy Lobb, like we've had with Liam Henry. That is a really, really bad sign that the culture of the club, and that could be many things. It could be inclusiveness. It could be performance-focused mentality. It could be a number of reasons as to why the players are choosing to leave. But the reality is there is a culture problem at this football club that is causing players to want to leave, whether that's back to their home state, whether that's to other places randomly. And I think this goes back 6-7 years, to be completely candid. I think this goes back to the end of Ross's tenure. So poor list management. It's hard to say about drafting this year, because Fremantle didn't really have a hand in the draft. So I don't think it's really fair to criticize their drafting with what they had. I think there should have been more of an effort to trade up, but they didn't, and they've gotten serviceable pieces of what they had available to them. So fair enough. So list management, I think, is fairly self-explanatory. Fremantle continue to lose players. They brought in a couple of players. Oscar McDonald can probably find his way into the team at some point this year as a defender. I've got time for him, and I think we picked him up cheaply, which is handy. Jeremy Sharp, I think he's a good footballer, but when he's possibly your best recruit in an off-season, and you're talking premierships in 6 years as an executive, I think you need to have a look at your recruitment more broadly. You've got an out-of-contract coach who objectively failed last year and at times seemed to not have buy-in from his players. I think the only way to avoid finishing in the bottom four this year is to play very defensive, very boring football, which Lomua can't afford to do, because that'll just make more of the fan base turn on him. So I think this is a really awkward situation for Fremantle, where if they try to stick to what that worked for them in 2022, the pieces aren't there to do it.
Sure.
If they try to be a bit more pragmatic, which they probably need to do with the list profile they currently have, that's just going to cause more issues in the media, in the public sphere, and the coaches. I don't think Lomio coaches next year at Fremantle.
No, I mean,
I don't see a scenario where Lomio is coaching next year, because I don't see a scenario where Fremantle are making finals this year.
So if that's the benchmark for him to keep his job, then definitely not. But if they're going to be going the way of 17th, like you're predicting, then he doesn't last to the bye.
No, but also I'd extend that. Say, let's say hypothetically they finish, bang on your prediction, they finish 13th.
Yep.
Is that good enough for a senior coach with now 5 years at a club, one finals appearance, and multiple finishes in the bottom third of the ladder? Keeping in mind the context of the football club is an unsuccessful one. I don't think that's good enough. No, personally, I would struggle to back that decision.
And you know me, like I was a staunch defender of J-Lo for a little while, and as the season last year kind of went on, you started to your words started to ring true to me, and I was like, actually, maybe Jesse's not just talking shit. Maybe he's actually got a few points up his sleeve there. And I was like, maybe he's not the guy. Maybe he's not the guy. And you know, I'm hoping that he proves us wrong. I'm skeptical that he will also, but we'll see. We can only see.
The fact that no cold water whatsoever was poured on the Luke Beveridge rumor a couple of weeks ago, I'd struggle to see him lasting beyond the bye. That's not a thing of, I think he should be gone by the bye. I'm willing to let the first few games play out. But the fact there was no effort to dispel the rumor that Beveridge was going to jump ship to Fremantle by either side, by Fremantle or the Dogs to any serious extent, makes me think that there's a truth to that. And also Fremantle are happy to let that run, because they've also realised he's out of contract. 2022, in the context of the list we had then versus now, is a lifetime ago. And there's, to be honest, and I know this is going to sound quite pessimistic, I don't think there's a lot of positives for Fremantle this year. I think we know who's going to play best 22 for the most part.
Yep.
Some of those guys are probably quite fortunate to be playing best 22 in an AFL side, but ultimately that's the pieces we have. We continue to not be able to recruit a second key forward. We continue to not be able to recruit and retain wingers. And we continue to be indecisive with what the best back six is.
And you're cut. You're going on too long now. I have to cut you off
I'm
because
waffling.
I know, and you're not waffling. You're just very passionate, which is great. All fan bases should be passionate. I don't buy into the whole thing like, oh no, you should support your teams at all times. Yeah, you should, but that doesn't mean necessarily just blindly accepting everything as being gung ho and all glorious. No,
No,
it's fine. But I do have to cut you off because I know you will keep going, and
correct.
we're up to F. We're up to F. We have to get to W yet. Crikey Moses.
Well, let's get stuck into Geelong, the 2022 Premiers, who, at risk of looking rather silly, I've got on a fairly big drop this year. I've got them finishing down in 13th position, Liam, because I just think they're due.
I have them 14th. I agree.
Geelong have done a phenomenal job now for the better part of 2 decades to be the best side in the competition across that span. I think from 2006 to 2023, inclusive, I think Geelong would take the mantle as being the best side across that time period.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because you've got a flag in 2007, you've got a flag in 2022, you've got plenty of flags in the middle.
Yep.
However, they don't seem to have quite regenerated as well as they did in about 2017, 2018 to then build those extra 2 flags this time around. And that just worries me from that perspective. And to be honest, I don't think Geelong fans would begrudge a year or 2 down if it means they can then push themselves back to where the club wants to be. So I don't think this is a long-term thing for Geelong. I'm pretty confident they'll bounce back and be in the finals by 2026, 2027. But I do think there's a couple of years on the down for them to get back to that level.
And this is the annoying thing about Geelong is like, no matter what happens, they're going to prove us wrong and finish like 3rd or something like that because this is what they do.
That's
but no,
just
I mean,
Geelong.
that's just Geelong because they're just like they've been good for so long that it's tricky being part of a successful team because you get used to that success. So I know a lot of my friends who are Eagles supporters are having a tough time the last few years because they're so used to being so good all the time. And I think the Geelong faithful and cohort are in for that at least for this year. I think they've got another year or 2 not making finals before, like you said, they'll jump straight back up. But look, watch us be fools and they'll win the premiership this year. All right, who's next? Who's after Geelong?
Gold Coast, who I've got down in 16th position. For a lot of reasons, we've got Fremantle down there as well. They've got the coach. They've absolutely got the coach, but I don't think they have the club culture, and I don't think they have the list. That pretty much sums up my stance. I think they're a bottom 4 side this year. Liam?
Well, here is my dark horse for the year.
Oh no, here we go.
So I don't buy into the whole culture being bad. Like when I watched them play last year, they seemed like they were all in it to win it. Every single game, they always seem to be in it to win it. They've got the coach now as well. They've always been kind of like knock the door and then run away. They do the old knock and dash. They kind of go, yep, oh, top 8, and then they just fuck off. This year, I reckon they're going to knock and they're just going to peek their head in. I reckon they're going to finish 8th.
Who's there? It's the Gold Coast.
It's the Gold Coast.
I'm interested to see how the style difference from Judah Hardwick goes for them. That's a concern for me because, like you said, they do have a very bubbly on-field culture, but I wonder how much of that comes from the more happy-go-lucky sense of Stuart Dew, who I think would be in the ring for a Fremantle job if that becomes vacant halfway through the season. But I think I do get the sense that there's opportunity for Gold Coast to definitely excel this year, and I don't think Damien Hardwick's a guy that will enjoy finishing bottom 4.
No.
But I just think there's enough quality above them to keep them down if they get on a bad run. And I think they just need a couple more years to get used to how. I think it needs to be a plan to win a flag in 5 years' time for them, not 3. And I think that starts with a consolidation year this year. Blood some younger players, figure out how to plan to Hardwick style, and back him for a 5-year plan. Don't say you need to have it done in 3. If they don't make finals in the next 2 years, that's okay, because they've got probably the best coach in the competition. Just like Clarkson do with North, they've got elite level coaches. Give them time to instill their vision and let them grow into the role.
Not going to have to wait 3 years. 8th this year. That's my dark horse prediction. The Gold Coast Suns, I reckon, going to be up there. What about next? Are we up to the Giants now?
We are, and there's a big sound outside the top 8 for me. I've got them finishing 9th this year, which is a pretty big call based on what I've seen some of the bookmakers' markets for who's finishing where. But I'm not all in on the Giants.
They're a funny team though. The Giants are the team that you just think that they're always just going to be perpetually down the bottom end of the ladder, right? Even the year that they made the grand final, they showed very quickly they weren't meant to be there. Like it's a weird kind of thing with GWS. It's just like, oh, it's cute other Sydney team, well done, and you always think they're going to do really, really poorly. But I mean, last year they showed a lot of really, really promising signs that I think if built on this year, could see them actually finishing up in the top 8 for mine. I reckon.
Where do you have them?
7th.
7th. So we're pretty similar then for the most part, I think, on that one. I think so. And look, that's not to say that they can't finish in the top 8. They very well can. But sure. I get the sense they're a year off. And there's just that one, much like almost Adelaide were last year. I think they're at that stage now where they're probably just that year off from really furnishing into that side that is competitive in the top 8. And if they get into the top 8, there's no reason they can't push on because they do have quality in their list. Yep. But it just remains to be seen whether they can crack what I think will be a very even competition.
And I think that's what it is. Like that middle part, it's just so hard to kind of justify who to put where, because I think there's going to be so many teams who are quite close, which is why I think I've got the Suns kind of cracking it this year anyway, because it's just like, why not? Why not me? Yeah, Giants. Yeah, just a solid middle of the pack team.
Well, after a bit of a lull, it looks like Hawthorn are gearing up for a bit more competitive season. Certainly in my eyes, I've got them finishing in 11th position this year. I'm not all in on Hawthorn, but I think they've added the right pieces, and I think they've got the right man and the right club culture to leave that bottom 4, bottom 5 scrap behind them. So 11th place for me. I think they're a good side this year, and I think they're a team that are going to be very hard to break down and be very hard to beat. And that's going to win them games against teams around them that maybe are a bit more free-flowing and a bit more aggressive around them. So I've got Hawthorn finishing 11th. And they may be a year off. I may have put them too much too soon. But I like what they have. There's something about Hawthorn this year, I think, that's going to just inject a little bit of excitement into the competition. I don't think they'll make finals, but I think they could be there and about.
Look, I tend to agree. This is why I'm letting you go first now, because everything you're saying is kind of like, I'm just like, yeah, that's actually pretty much on point, because I agree. It's a good young team on the rise. I've got them finishing 10th this year. I reckon they're going to push right up to the very, very, right up to the top of the bottom. They're going to push right up to the top of the bottom. I think they're going to make some strides this year. They looked exciting last year. They showed some good glimpses. So I think that this year, I think they're going to continue that on, especially given the age of the team. And yeah, I think it's going to be a good year for them. I think it's going to be a good year to be a Hawks fan, not to the caliber it was, 3-peat years down back in the early 2010s, but obviously that's a high bar. But yeah, going to be a good year for them. Going to be a good year as I take another swig of my drink.
Well,
they'll have fun. They'll have fun.
Football. It'll be fun football for Hawthorn
this year. Football for Hawthorn. If we can still beat them by 60 points each game, that'd be great.
I don't think we're beating any sides by 60 points this year. Even a lot across the road. Now, this is probably our most divisive one, or one of the two most divisive ones, I think, across our season. In fact, no, it's not, because we've got to do one more side first. North Melbourne. Now, yes. North have, in my opinion, one of the best 3 coaches in the competition, but they have a list that I think is fair to say isn't entirely up to AFL standard across the board. They've lost probably their most X-factor player to indiscretions. I think that's probably the fairest way to describe Taron Thomas.
I think that's probably the fairest way to describe Taron Thomas, yes.
Okay, we'll go with that. Please don't sue me, Taron. I like my money.
Allegedly.
In my opinion. However, that aside, they've got some fantastic young pieces, Harry Sheasel, Davies Uniacke. They've got plenty of quality in that team, but they also have plenty of holes in that team to be pushing forward. I've got them finishing bottom this year, only because I think there's a team that finished bottom last year that actually doesn't necessarily need to be down that low this year, and we'll come to that when we get to them. But I get the sense they got out of jail with the spoon last year at times, and I think, simply put, their worst will lose to any team in this competition.
Yeah,
and if they do drop a couple of key players at the wrong time, and that's not when they verse Collingwood, that's when they verse Fremantle, Gold Coast, West Coast. If they've got outs at those games, that's going to make a big difference to them, I think. So I've got them finishing last. In saying that, though, I'd love to be proven wrong with North, because they are like Fremantle, like Potter. They're a working class club. They're a club that has an esteemed, proud history, and they don't deserve to be in the rut that they're in. But that's poor list management, and poor culture has put them here. So, fingers crossed North can get up and about again, but unfortunately for their supporters, they do have one more year of abject pain in store for them. Liam, where do you have North Melbourne finishing this year?
Dead last, yep. I don't think there's going to be anything fun for North Melbourne fans this year, unfortunately. I think it's going to be pretty dire for them, I'm sorry to say. I think if they can get 2 wins, they'll be doing well.
The trouble for North face, and I won't spend too much time on this, is their only hope of recruiting quality players at the moment seems to be the draft.
Yes.
Because, and this goes back 10 years, it seems to be an issue of nobody wants to play for North. And that could be for a number of reasons. And it's not a problem exclusive to North Melbourne. Other Victorian clubs face that too. But it seems to be a problem that's really put North in a death spiral. And although I think they've drafted well, when you've got project players and you lose one of your biggest project players in Jason Horne-Francis, you set yourself up for years of tough seasons. And that's a choice they've made. And I honestly think they're comfortable with that. And if I was a North Melbourne supporter, I probably would be too. But I think for them, they're just not at the stage they need to be yet. And that's fine if they've got the plan to rebuild over X amount of years, but I wouldn't be expecting a rapid turnaround this year for them.
We move on now to the other Melbourne team, I believe. I don't think there's anyone. I didn't know there was no one between Hawthorn and North Melbourne. Where are all those teams, in the middle? Did we miss Melbourne? LMN?
Well, I did Kangaroos. I did K for Kangaroos because that's how they used to be. In the old ladder, they used to be known as a Kangaroos, so I've knocked them out. So we'll do Melbourne. We'll do Melbourne.
Are they after K? I'm sure they are. Melbourne. They are after K. Now this is a team. Thank you, Jesse. Now this is a team that is going to be probably an interesting one because obviously they've had a lot of off-field things. We've talked about Gus before, but obviously a lot of other issues going on off the field, which can only impact their ability, I would say, across this year. At least on paper, it looks like it seems as if it's going to be a case of, is it too much to overcome? Is it too much for them to kind of get their ducks back in a row to kind of fix everything up? They've got a list to do it. The question is, will they? I think they will finish 9th. I think they'll finish just outside the top 8 this year. They were already, to me, having a little bit of a dip last year. I felt like they were kind of not the Melbourne that we saw back during the COVID era. I think they've been definitely losing a little bit of steam off those years. So to continue on that trajectory and also add in all these off-field things going on with them, I think it would be. I don't think it's unfair to think they might finish just outside the top 8.
There is so much about Melbourne 2024 that overlaps perfectly with the West Coast side of 2007 because the list is there. Mm-hmm. The list is absolutely talented, but there is enough off field, and it may not be to the same extent as what happened there. It may be worse. We don't know the extent of how many players are involved with this alleged cocaine scandal. We genuinely don't know, and we probably won't for half the season, which is almost the point. We're not going to know if there's investigations ongoing. There are going to be players, whether they are complicit or not, allegedly, that are going to be feeling the heat. They're going to have interviews scheduled. They're going to have potential legal proceedings coming up. It's a hard environment to focus on. And I think it's a terrible environment to coach in for Simon Goodman because, and again, I don't want to get into mudslinging here, but his name has not been removed from these rumors over a number of years now. So it's going to be a really difficult environment to play in. And I don't think they're going to finish bottom 4, but they fall into that category of poor club culture that we talk about the bottom sides being in. They don't seem to have a good club culture. I don't think Melbourne fans would disagree with me, and if you do, let me know in the comments. But I don't think it's unfair to say that there's a poor club culture in Melbourne currently, and they will suffer. I think their list is like West Coast in 07, strong enough to make finals. I've got them in 7th now, I believe, don't I, Liam, after I made that change.
You did. Yes, you did. Yep.
But I worry about them. And it wouldn't shock me if they missed the 8 because there's just that much going on. And, you see it time and time again. I actually want to point to English football in this because I think it's quite a good comparison. When you have off-field turmoil, it's very, very hard, even with a quality team, to bring the results. And you look at some of the bigger clubs in England, even in those relegation dogfights at the moment, you can get dragged in with poor management, poor boardroom direction. It's very easy to slip and crumble. And I think Melbourne are at risk of crumbling this year.
Yeah, you feel it. You kind of feel it coming for Melbourne. I think it's just like it was kind of bubbling, and then we'll see. We'll see where they end up. Who's next? Who's next off the list?
Next is potentially our biggest divide in terms of ladder position, and that's Port Adelaide. I'm all in on Port Adelaide this year, and Liam will probably tell me why he disagrees in a second. But there's a lot lining up here. I think it's a tired fan base with Ken Hinkley, so I think it's a real situation of chips in. If it's going to be Hinkley's premiership, it has to be now. I get the sense that they've got a list that can win a premiership. In my opinion, I think they've got enough of a list from top to tail in key positions that allows them to push. They've got the advantage of having a strong home ground fortress, which they do exercise quite well.
Mm-hmm.
And, you've got to remember, they've been in and around the top 4 for the better part of a decade intermittently. They've managed to retain themselves as a quality side for the better part of 10 years now. I think this is it for them, and these can go one of two ways. They can either not live up to it, things can go wrong, Ken's gone by the bye, and they start the rebuild, and they finish something like 12th, they start the rebuild, they get on with their lives. They probably spend a couple of seasons down and then try to build towards the end of the decade. Or things go right, they ride the light, and they might not win a flag, but they get themselves into top 4, they're playing in valuable finals or prestigious finals, they're getting themselves every chance to win a flag. I'm prepared to risk looking silly to an extent and say it's going to be the latter for them, and I've got them pushing up into 3rd position.
3rd? As high as 3rd?
As high as 3rd.
Where do you think I've got them?
I think you've probably got them around 8th.
I have them 5th. I think that they've got a
not too bad,
I think they've got a good list, and that was one of the teams I actually really liked watching last year because they just seem to have a bit of oomph about them that a lot of the other teams kind of didn't have. Like, you had the clinical nature of like your Collingwoods. They had the oomph. They had the kind of the fuck it, let's go kind of attitude about them, which I really liked. And they've got a team that does that. And I think, I think that this is going to be a good year for them. I didn't even think that there was any chance of a slump. I thought they were going to contend again. But I've learned something there, Jesse. Apparently slump is inbound. Maybe not this year, but soon.
I think that's just the nature of the sport and the nature of the egalitarian competition that we have. And some clubs slump for 30 years, other clubs slump for 2 years. But the reality is that, there will be times where, and we're seeing, I think with Geelong this year, I think we'll see it with another club we'll get to in a bit as well. And I think we'll see it potentially with Port Adelaide in the next couple of seasons where they're going to have to trough in order to peak. And that's just because of the way the draft system works.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Couldn't say it better myself. Richmond. Are we going to Richmond
now? It'd be very funny to put them in 9th place. It would be very funny to put them in 9th place. But I've not put them in 9th place. I've put them in 8th place. And that's because I have time for this Richmond list. I know they've probably not delivered as well as they could have in the last couple of years, and there's been poor runs of form. There's been a bit of off-field drama. There's been bits and pieces not to like about this Richmond list. But at the same time, they strike me as one of the most professional clubs from top to tail in the competition. And in a tight season, I'd rather put my chips on the professional roulette wheel than the unprofessional roulette wheel, if that analogy makes sense. I'd rather go, if we're saying black is professional and red is unprofessional, I'm putting my chips on black.
Actually, zero is the unprofessional bet there. 0 is just terrible.
0 is North.
That's true.
Sorry, North fans. I do actually really feel bad for you. But look, in all seriousness, though, like we jest, but you'd put your money on a professional, well-organised club in a finals dogfight, which is, I think, what we'll get this year. And I think Richmond will have enough quality and enough temerity to then go and get themselves that top 8 position. Liam, where do you have them finishing?
11th. I disagree with you. I have no reason really to disagree with you because I'm not as eloquent when it comes to football as you are, my friend. But I don't know, just like, again, working on my vibes, my chi for football, which has won me like so much money at Sportsbet. It's crazy. It's not going to look good for Richmond this year. I have nothing to base that on basically outside of previous performance. And unfortunately, I don't know enough about Richmond to give you anything more than that, unfortunately.
That's the analysis we come for on the Dodgy Punts podcast. That's why you're listening right now. Just think about that. That's why you're listening.
That's why you're listening, because I'm the dodgy of this punt. So who is next? Who is next after Richmond?
Well, let's do St Kilda.
Sure.
I think St Kilda will be a hard side to beat this year because they have the coach that is very hard to beat and break down, and that'll probably get them 8 to 10 wins. But I'm not all in on St Kilda by any stretch. I think they'll finish 10th, and I think I could have had them finishing a lot lower than that. I just don't think they're that good.
No.
I think they've recruited well. I think adding Liam Henry is a big plus for them because he gives them, with guys like Wangle and Milera, a bit more X factor, and I think they really need that. So it's not to say they can't be a fun side to watch. I just don't think they will be. And I'm prepared to risk them in my finals ladder because I don't think they have, with the exception of the coach, I don't think they have the mentality to go into a finals dogfight and come out on top. So St Kilda in 10th for me, Liam.
8 to 10 wins, 12th spot. Yep. I mean, I get so bored watching St Kilda the last few years. Like, if there's a game that I'm not going to watch, I'd probably rather watch an Eagles versus North Melbourne game because, it's the battle for the wooden spoon. It's fun.
Spoon Bowl is always fun.
Spoon Bowl is always fun. If there's a Saints game on, I'm like, ugh, God, I got to watch this rubbish. 12th, I think the middling team, probably the most mid team there is. I think you got the defensive Rossi. And then not much. Max King might kick 42.93 this year, which would be good to see. And
well, this is the thing. If he is probably the one factor that I think can push St Kilda into a final spot. To be clear, I don't think they'll get there, but I think if there was going to be one factor that could push them there, it's a 70-goal season from Max King. However, I simply don't think he's mentally up to that. And if Max wants to prove me wrong, absolutely go ahead and do it. But
please do, Max.
Mentality in key forwards is such a big thing. And I'm actually quite keen to chat with Scott Cummings about this on SEN on Friday morning about this, where I'll be on.
Yes.
But I think mentality is such a big thing for key forwards, says the guy that's 5'5". And I think ultimately, I think ultimately Max seems to lack that. And that's not just the game from 2022 where he kicked about 1 goal 6 and single-handedly tanked St Kilda's finals chances in very funny fashion. But I simply don't think he has that guile that you need to lead a forward line. And I think the sooner that he's a better Kaczynski than he is a Revolt, to use a St Kilda analogy.
Sure. I've always looked at Max King and I've never seen an AFL player when I watch Max King. Like, he always seems a bit too unsure, a bit too gangly, a bit too he takes good clunk. But then what else is there? I don't know. I just don't. I watch him and I'm just like, what is it? If
you traded Aaron Norton to St Kilda in exchange for Max King, you would see no difference in the sides because they're the same player.
Interesting.
They're an identical football player. Good
clunk, sometimes kick.
And Max has a twin, and yet his closer twin is Aaron Norton.
Oh man! All right, who's next? We're at the bottom end now.
Well, we're at the bottom end of the alphabet. Alphabet. Well, they may have just lost Taylor Swift from the state, but we do have to talk about Sydney now. And where are the Swans going to finish this year, Liam?
Third, fourth.
Fourth?
I've got them top four. I think Sydney are going to be a very formidable side this year. I think they just seem to have a. Is Buddy still playing? I can't
Buddy's
keep. I think good. Not good. I mean, he was a legend for the game, but I was just like, wait, is he still going again? He's gone.
He could do a lock-in and come back out of retirement 3 years after he finished up.
Sure, he probably could.
Why not?
He's that good. Chuck him in the four.
We'll take him.
And like the old school days, like Plugger, just chuck him in the four in the goal square. Don't have to move at all. Just stand there, elbow out of the way, clunk in the square. 14 goals a game. Thank you very much, Plugger. No, I don't. I think Sydney this year is going to dominate. I think they're going to be really, really good. They're going to be really hard to beat against most teams, especially on their tiny field over at the SCG. Have you seen a game at the SCG? Have you ever been to the SCG to watch a game?
I've never been to the SCG, but I always watch it on television. A, try to figure out where they put the camera, and B, why you can kick it from 50 and it goes about 20 meters.
The camera's like kind
insane
of like on the
insane. Look, we jest, but it's an AFL standard ground in terms of dimensions, so we can't really make too much fun of it. But what I will say is about
what does that mean? What does that mean? AFL's standard ground? There isn't one. Everyone can do what the fuck they want. They can have a ground of any proportion. What's this? It's a square now.
They actually can't. They actually can't.
What'd you call me? Okay, fair enough. Okay, sorry, go on. Sydney, why are they going to be top 4? Oh, you don't have them in the top 4.
I don't. I have them 5th, but I could easily make the case for them to be top 4 because I think like last year, there's a very even clump in that upper echelon below Collingwood and also Carlton this year as well. I think there's a clump there, and I think Sydney are part of that clump. I think adding Brodie Grundy is a massive win for them. I think it gives them real midfield stability because you get a quality ruckman and you also get quality leadership as well.
It's a massive win for Brodie Grundy also.
Well, Brodie wants to play in the ruck. He's going to play ruck at Sydney. He gets some brilliant midfielders around him. I mean, how good is Sydney's midfield when they're firing? Errol Goulden could be a sleeper for the Brownlow this year.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
He could be a sleeper for the Brownlow medal this year. And I'm happy to mention that when we get to our last segment. That he is.
I had him in my fantasy team last year, and goddamn, did he not rack me up some points? Thank you, Errol. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Errol. Erroldo.
No, I agree with you. Definitely not even a sleeper. I think he's just he should be up there in the top. Top's his favourites for the Brownlow. If he has a year like he did last year, absolutely no reason why not. But yes, Swans up top for us.
Well, now we get to the W's, and there are 2 W's we need to go through. Both Western-based, one certainly more geographically western than the other, and we'll do that one first. And that is the West Coast Eagles. Now, didn't have the best hit out against Fremantle last week. Don't think it really matters, but what does matter is losing Matthew Flynn for 10 weeks and losing Ruben Gibney to the dentist, which is not good for them either. That, to me, just looking historically at concussions, I don't think this is as simple as a 10, 14-day sit out and come back. I think they may lose him for a bit longer. Mm-hmm. And given West Coast history with concussions too, around Daniel Venables, Brad Shepherd, I'd be really surprised if he played the first game outside of the mandatory concussion sit down, because it was a bad head knock. It was a bad head knock, and if he's had to go to the dentist as well, it's physically rattled him. So,
what did that happen in the practice match, or what happened?
I believe so.
Okay.
But it did. So he's going to be potentially facing a bit longer than just round 1 on the sidelines, I suspect. But look, I've actually got West Coast finishing 15th this year. This was the shocker to me.
This was a shocker to me. I won't lie.
There's a caveat that I don't think any of the bottom 4 sides are any good. And I think they could all swap places, winning less than 4 or 5 games. I genuinely think you could win 5 games and take 15th this year.
Okay.
Because I think there is that little quality at the bottom of the ladder this year. And I look at the 4 sides down. I look at West Coast, I look at Gold Coast, I look at Fremantle, I look at North that I've got down in my bottom 4. And I think which side has the professionalism and also which side understands adversity the most out of these teams. West Coast last year, for all their faults and for finishing last and being flogged routinely, there were plenty of games where they were up for it.
Mm-hmm.
And in a competition where I think there's a few teams on a downward skiing slope, that's all you need this year to pinch a couple of games. I think they've got enough in terms of mentality, not necessarily talent, but mentality to push themselves away from that bottom 2. I think Oscar Allen is set for his year. I think this is Oscar Allen's year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we will see him establish himself as one of the best key forwards in the competition, if he already isn't. And I think we will see a couple of those players waiting in the wings step up. But what I'm interested to hear from you, Liam, is where do we think Harley Reid is going to land this season? Because we're West Australian, we're technically in the media now. We are legally obligated to talk about Harley Reid for at least 3 minutes. So get your stopwatch out, start talking about Harley.
I'd love to, but we've already gone to an hour and a half, and I just simply couldn't risk my job in any capacity to talk about Harley Reid. That's a taboo thing to talk about nowadays, and I actually haven't been paying enough attention to Harley Reid to give 2 shits. I wouldn't have a clue. Is he injured? I thought he was injured. Didn't he do a hammy?
He's fine. He did get badly.
I would have learned more about him.
Andy Brayshaw.
I would have learned more about him, but I couldn't read some of his articles. So how am I supposed to know anything about Harley Reid this year? I just don't know.
Have you picked up the back page? Have you picked up the back page of the local newspaper anytime from October through to today?
October 2001, probably not. No, it's been a minute since I picked up a newspaper, my friend. It's been a minute.
Well, that's a lesson for literacy if we've ever seen one. I think
that's probably true. Not this year for Eagles. Second last. I think they'll get above North Melbourne. Yep. I don't think there's there's enough going on, enough improvement to get above that for mine.
I don't think there's a lot of improvement. I just think the other sides around them are going to genuinely crash even further. Well, you've got to remember, West Coast had us in the first derby last year until they lost 5 players in the space of 20 minutes. We were going to lose that game. And then they lost their bench.
I know. It was bad. But then the next year, and then the next game, we won by 160 points or something like that. It's crazy. Doesn't matter. I mean, look, to be fair, I've got Suns 8th and you've got them 13th. Not 13th. What's that? 14th. So 16th. Yeah. So obviously I know what I'm talking about. Last but not least, we'll finish off with the Bulldogs. Look. I mean, this is the problem with some of these teams. I don't know enough about them to give you any sort of opinion. That's why I have this on with you, Mr. Jesse, because you are my footy analyst buddy, my buddy or pal, and you can tell me everything there is to know as to why the Bulldogs, in my opinion, answer it for me. Why do I think the Bulldogs are going to finish in, what's that, 15th spot?
Wow, that is a draw. I've got them in 12th. So I think I'm not as pessimistic as you because I think there's enough talent in there to keep them out of the bottom 4. Mm-hmm. But what I will say is I think this is a club that is going to be coachless at some point during the season. And I think this is a club that needs to start thinking about the 2028, 2029 seasons. Because this isn't a premiership list anymore. It's not a list that is going to challenge for top 4. And I think there's enough smart people at the football club to realise that this isn't a 2016 list. Mm. There's not a lot of excitement around this list for me. I think it's a fairly stock standard mid-table team. And I honestly think they're just going to plug away. They'll probably beat one side in the top 4 this year. At least once.
Well,
I don't think that's beyond them.
That happens every year. Every team seems to have one of those moments. You know, it's just like every now and then they just kind of show up against one of the good teams because the good teams let the guards down. And they give them the old rope. But I don't think there's enough consistency in this Bulldog side. So 12th for me, 15th for Liam. Liam, that wraps up our look at our ladder predictions. I'm sure the graphics are up there for all of our lovely, lovely viewers to have a look at. And if you're listening on Spotify or another podcasting platform, too bad. You have to go check us out on YouTube to see all of that. Now, as you would have seen from that little thing there, you're going to get a really good insight, or you got a really good insight into how Jesse and I are going to operate this podcast. I know nothing. Jesse is the man. He knows all the stuff. This guy over here, bang. He knows all of the shit when it comes to footy. So if you don't hear much from me, that's completely okay. I'll chip in every now and then with my takes. I'll give you my opinions, my thoughts, and then Jesse will tell you what's actually true. So, Mr. Jesse, let's wrap up. Let's wrap up because we've been going for. It was more comprehensive than I thought with the old ladder predictions there. Here's me thinking. I
don't know what you thought would happen with me.
Honestly, that's on me. I'll take that. I'll take responsibility for that. That was silly. So we're going to finish up with. We do. We're going to finish up with that dodgy punt. So this what it's going to be is we are now. I didn't have a chance to research this because I was on the phone to TPG for an hour and a half trying to get this internet to work. So
not a sponsor, just a fan.
Just not a sponsor, just a massive fan. Jesse, have you got a lovely dodgy punt for the peoples at home for this season? Are you going to do a futures? Do a futures one?
I am going to do a futures one. Now, This is obviously, first of all, a disclaimer that always remember to gamble within your means and call 1-800-858-858 if you are experiencing any type of gambling harm. So with that very important caveat out of the way,
very important.
We're going to have a punt. So I think, first of all, keep in mind, I'm just using the main bookmaker that I think most people will use here. I'm not going to name them because they don't like me very much. But I'm going to use the main bookmaker to establish my odds for this one. And we're going to do a double. We're going to do a Brownlow medalist into a Coleman medalist.
Okay.
And I think paying $97.50 for the two legs. I think this is a bet you can responsibly have, and responsibly have with a very small amount of money set
Sure.
aside for it. So,
Mhm.
current odds, keep in mind, odds is always subject to change and different bookmakers will offer different things.
hmm
My Brownlow medal pick for this year is Errol Goulden. Errol Goulden is paying $15 in current fixed odds betting. And my Coleman medal pick to go back-to-back is Charlie Kerner at $6.50 in fixed odds betting. Let's hope his hamstrings are still not made out of paper like they were at the start of his career. So if we can avoid those two, then we can get ourselves a nice two-leg multi paying $97.50. You can have $1 on it, have $2 on it. Don't have more than $10 on it because that's probably a waste of money. But what isn't a waste of money is donating to the Dodgy Punts podcast. Liam,
That's
get
right.
the tins out. We're going to start rattling. We're already begging for money on the first episode because why wouldn't we?
Why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we?
No, we just we.
You go on.
Do you have a dodgy punt, or are you just deferring to me for the dodgy punt?
No, because like I said, like I didn't have really. Well, give me a second. Let's see if I can whip one out now. Because
Well, I'll give the listeners and the viewers a serious tip. Then we've both put
Okay.
North Melbourne to take out the wooden spoon. That's
Yep.
currently about $3 on most bookmakers on fixed prices. I think that's a good bet in terms of what you're looking at in terms of value there. Apart from that, though, I think it's hard to invest with any confidence in futures at this point in the season unless you're going to arb it or try to trade it on a certain exchange called Betfair. Might as well name them, even though they're not a sponsor. Hi, Betfair, please sponsor us. In all seriousness, though, I do think there are opportunities to trade this season with the futures markets, but for the sake of keeping it fairly surface level, I think nice little Brownlow Coleman double and North Melbourne to win the wooden spoon at about $3.
all right, here's my dodgy punt then.
All right.
Now, don't forget the name of the show. It's called Dodgy Punt.
Who's winning the Coleman, Liam?
Well, based on your predictions before, having a bit of a standout year, Coleman, let's give it to Oscar Allen. Why don't we do that? Just see him just go bananas in the goal square. Just go nuts.
I don't mind that, actually. What's he paying on your bookmaker of choice?
15 fixed. Brownlow medalist. Port Adelaide having a good year this year, are they? Okay. Zach Butters for
I
Brownlow.
actually quite like yours.
Zach Butters for Brownlow, Oscar Allen for Coleman will set you back on this bookie at 225 to 1 odds for that bad boy. So
I
again,
actually think
$1,
it's a lot worse than
$1, $2, chuck it on if you got them. If you don't got them, please don't do it.
No,
Gamble
1-800-858-858 is the number to call.
That's right.
Well, Liam, we've encouraged responsible gambling. We've gone through our
We
ladder
have.
prediction.
We have. Next week we'll be back and we'll be talking about the preseason games. I might watch the one tonight. Why not? If it's on, stuff it. I'll get KO just specifically to watch it because there's no other means for us to do it here. Because who has aerial TV anymore? I'll give that a watch
I don't even know
tonight.
what that is.
There we go. We're back next week. We'll go through all the games. We'll go through some news and we'll see how we go leading into round 0, the opening round of the season, which is but 2 weeks away. I can't believe how quickly this off-season has gone. We're there again, ready to go.
If you have any suggestions about what you want us to cover or talk about, make sure you leave a comment
Sure.
or send us a message on our social media platforms, which I think will be up at some point soon. TBC, Liam, you're the
look,
content man.
just because I'm sure it's not going to be taken, and I'll set it up after. Now that we've got the first episode in the bank, I'm within my rights to set it up now. So I'm almost certain it's not taken. At Dodgy Punts on Instagram, find us there. If it's wrong, I'll tell you next week.
But no, thank you everyone for tuning in. We greatly appreciate your support on the first episode. I'm Jesse Dart. That was Liam Courtney, and we'll see you next week on the Dodgy Punts podcast.
Peace.